Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad that you're still here and that you're interested, curious about the whole ESP ESM management thing. So there are a few tools out there. A few are made by Fens, and one, of course, is made by Bethesda themselves. They disabled it kind of in Creation Kit, but of course you can enable it again. You should be able to see my screen now. A short disclaimer, I'm trying to cover an overview, so you see basically why we do this and what we actually do here, what's the goal, and you see a workflow and a few tools here. But I also want to say in advance that our previous work has been mainly focused on Legendary Edition, and we are just now in the wake of merging to Special Edition. So the 4 tools I'm going to present you today for merging your files, 2 of them are rather old, and one of it is better suited for Special Edition. So I just give you basic workflow and the comments and the some information I had about the tools. If you have further questions, it's always suggested to follow the links and read a little bit more yourself. Like if you, let's say, make a bigger project and you want to depend on it, I would suggest you to take this as a starting point and then check out some more details to find out. So it's always a bit subjective, because if people work with these tools for a long time, maybe they will find that their tool is better. So that might have happened to me as well. So that's my little disclaimer to you. Okay, so as everything we discuss here, it's basically the result of many people working together for a long time. So I couldn't even talk about this without having spent a lot of time with others who actually also had great interest in this and dive deeper. So I learned from Rodedra and Tascani and many others here. Like you see that there's also some of the tool creators in this list. And it's just amazing in our hobby here that we actually keep learning every day new things and try to get as professional as possible. So all of this is not my work, it's more like a community effort. And thank you to everyone who was involved so far and we talked with. All right. So the first question that we should tackle here is, what are actually these master files and why are they even relevant to us? Like, why do we even need this process? So yeah, what are the master files and why do we merge? And then before we merge and compile a new master build, we want to clean our patches, our ESPs. And that's actually not trivial, because the bigger the project and the longer you do this, the more you encounter specific issues or you find specific tools to help you on this way. And finally, the already announced overview of the 4 tools that we have to merge our files that are known to me. Yeah, you never know, maybe there are other tools created by mod authors, but that's at least what we have gathered over the last years. So our ESMs are our project files, and they include our projects and the properties of these projects and their resources. Their resources means that the ESM, of course, does not directly include the textures. It just references them. So some assets are being handled directly in the ESM, others are being handled indirectly. So as I said, indirectly would be meshes, textures, audio files, scripts. They will get a form ID, which functions like a name, like a pointer basically, and other things like logic that you put in conditions or texts are directly inside the ESM file, or landscape parameters. So this form ID basically functions as a name, a unique name for every entry we have in such a master file. And it is very important that these names are unique, else you will end up overriding, let's say, a mountain block with a gate or something everywhere in the world. And so to avoid basically equal IDs, you need to make sure that when you merge, they are, when there's a conflict, there's going to be some overriding here, and they are renumbered. But that's, however, not always the case, especially with Special Edition. You have more entries available than in Legendary Edition. You know, you don't need strip masters, so you usually have more space, and it's very unlikely that you get identical form IDs. So it was a bigger issue in Legendary Edition. Yeah. If you use other master files, of course, they will always have to be loaded with them. So your master file also has dependencies depending on what resources you're using. So they are also the basis that you build on for using patch files, unless you make a completely new game like in Daryl or something. But even then, if you use any resources, you will still require the old master files. Okay, so what's the basic difference? They just have a copyright flag, a writing protection flag, so you cannot directly override ESMs. ESPs, if you change something in them, yeah, boom, the entry is changed. But in an ESM, you cannot just simply go in and delete something. Whenever you would click on delete perhaps or add something, you would automatically create a new ESP. And that is very important. But I will get to this very soon. So what's important here is that once you load an ESM, you don't need to load all entries. There's just a specific set of entries being loaded, whilst if you load an ESP creation kit and the game is loading all of these entries. So especially with Legendary Edition, before it was an issue that you have less RAM available. So you want to have a master file to get your RAM sorted and have more FPS basically. The other thing is that for compatibility and consistency, you want to merge, of course, so everyone has the same base file to work from, and you don't have to have dirty edits. So you don't have conflicts in there and things that contradict each other. So for all of these reasons, and I just make it short, it's just the best to have one master build, obviously. So you don't have conflicts between different branches. The basic model how you get to a master file is usually that you have a development cycle. So you have development going on when new patch files are created, new ESPs. And then before you bring them together, you need to clean them. So you look at them, and we'll see this in detail very soon. And you identify problems before you create the master file or update the master file, because else you would just merge all these problems into the master file and make it very messy. Then you would merge them together to create the new instance of the master file, which then could be checked, analyzed, and uploaded, so everyone can work with it, and you wouldn't have to be afraid of having a lot of bugs or things floating around. Like some of those merged files might have had very strange overrides on vanilla files or contradict each other, and you'll be very sure that you have resolved all of these, and everyone has a common standard to go from. Right, so that is very important to have a reliable iterative software development, and also to allow people to work from different places all around the world and all around the clock, basically independently from each other, and bring it together at some point again. So also you have the ability to be more transparent, because you can basically see what is in the master build and what has been achieved recently. So it's not like a team of 20 people and everyone works for themselves and they don't have any idea what's going on. Right. So before you can actually merge, it's very important that the ESPs are clean. So that means that you don't carry issues, dirty edits into your new master build. And there are certain ways how to track down these errors. And it's also very similar to what you do in Q&A. So quality assurance, also after merging, you will use the same methods to find out if there is an issue. In TS5 Edit, I'm sure you're familiar with TS5 Edit. I will show you in a blink. It is basically for finding if there's missing references or if you have override conflicts. So let's say two of these actually change the same entry. And then what you see is here, this yellow color, because something is overwritten. We'll get to this in a second. And then you will see exactly how in TS5 Edit this is being marked. But I would like to go by, I think I just closed my presentation slider window. Okay. Okay, I'll just go here. So So in TS5 Edit, you will see the entries and if you have override conflicts, and you can remove records that are identical to the masters. And you can also remove dependencies and revert edits and apply other scripts. So there's a few things you can do specifically to singular entries, which is very useful to directly track them down. If you start Creation Kit, you might have noticed that there's always this very annoying message you get, the editor log. Basically, you have an editor ini file that gives you the editor warnings, and it will tell you exactly where there have been rendering issues. So when basically the game is loading a cell, or the Creation Kit is loading a cell, it will tell you exactly that there was a shader or a texture missing, or vertex color was wrong. So NIF related issues are well found there, as well as some outstanding things that you have. Like you will find parameters that are very odd for level design. So there's a few, I will specify this later, and enough mesh issues, as well as marker issues, things that you find in the cell and level design. So, and in the Papyrus log, you can also enable a logging that is specifically for the game, when the game is running, and it will show you the last commands that the game was doing before perhaps you had to crash the desktop. So this is very interesting to find if you have crashes. And finally, of course, you usually have people, especially to the end of a project, you will have people trying to find bugs and trace them down, and using console commands and tools to document them for the team. So that could help you as well. And there are some custom detection tools, of course. So some people also made tools to automatically track such issues. Right, so TS5 Edit, straightforward, and as a short introduction, you will just select the files you want to check, the masters and the plugins on top. And then you have on the left a tree view window where it shows all the masters and plugins you load. And on the right, it will give you a detail window that shows you basically the entries. So this is what I just showed you before here. Just going back to it. Here. Okay, so on the left you have the tree dialog, the tree window, basically. So you can open it up, and then you see a bunch of entries. I already applied a script here, so you have these colors. They signal if there was an override, and on the right you have different entries. So usually white entries are new entries. This is just because I'm looking at Hearthfires and the unofficial Skyrim Legendary Edition patch. So here this footstep, for instance, was added completely new. It has no conflict, it's completely white. However, this form ID list here, there's something yellow, and that is because you have new entries here. And if you right click here in the details window, you can also just click on hide non-conflict, no conflict in empty rows, and there you go. Now you see only the rows that have been modified. And here, see on the left, this is the basic file where this basic entry originates from, which would be Skyrim ESM. And going to the right, you see top down the load order. So you'll see that it's overwritten by update ESM, and after that overwritten by Dawnguard ESM, and finally overwritten by unofficial Skyrim Legendary Edition patch. And as we know with load orders, it's always that the last entry wins. So the file that has been loaded last has the highest priority. And so if we load the game now or the creation kit, what we would get here for this footsteps would be this entry from unofficial Skyrim patch. Or it's not the footsteps. I'm in form ID list anyway, so you would just get this entry. So this would be basically valid. And if you would merge this, it would override everything. So if I was, let's say, if I was making one huge master file, just for the theory here, and it would be Skyrim number 2, it would have all these entries here on the right, but those would be gone. And I could also just copy them here with drag and drop if I wanted to. So, and you will see something. Once I have copied them here, everything should appear green. Oh, I can't do that. I see. So if I really go ahead and copy something from, let's say, the unofficial patch, into the basic ESM. Oh, I cannot. Okay, sorry guys, because it's a master. Okay, but if this was a patch file, I can just drop it here and that would be fine. And I can just remove the master flag of it anyways, so I can do that. Then everything would get green. And what I would do then is actually remove the identical to master records, because I don't want to have the same entries over and over again, right? So now I didn't keep track, but they should be gone. Okay, they aren't. Also, this is maybe a bad example here. The point is that you can remove identical records, and so you avoid having issues and bloating your build, which was especially in LA, of course, a problem if you had limited array entries that you could use. And you can also check for errors, but I will show you this in a second. So it's important here that you can see every little record. You have a color coding, so you can immediately understand where you have conflicts and where you haven't. In newer versions of TS5 Edit, however, some commands have been removed because, as Elminster EU said, most of the casual users will not require them, and if you use them the wrong way, they might even damage the ESMs, or the ESPs. So if you, for instance, remove delete entries, deleting flags, then you could end up with a lot of duplicates. So this is an issue. It's always recommended to get the latest version of TS5 Edit from the Discord. However, the commands might be version specific, so they might not be visible there in the newest version, some of them. And therefore, I was just using version 4. So first, when you open TS5 Edit, you load the files in the selection window, and then you wait until it says in the message view here that the background loader is finished. And then, as I just showed you, on the left you have the tree diagram, and on the right you have the details, and you can expand your files and see all the individual categories and then the entries. There's also a color coding here. So, oh, sorry, I think I jumped. And it will just tell you which one's overwritten here. So those who have a dark red font and the red highlighting will be overwritten. And those who have an orange highlighting will be the winners of the conflict and will overwrite the others. So, but they always come in a couple, of course. So if you have such a conflict and you resolve it, for instance, by copying the red entry, the dark red entry, into the conflict winner, so it's overwritten. So their entry is basically the same, and then you update the applied filter. You will see that the whole marking is gone because there won't be a conflict left. So once you resolve a conflict also and you refresh the filter, the color coding will update as well. So this helps really to visually track down things. And the yellow ones, we already saw them, is basically when entries are overwritten, as you saw with the Hearthfire's ESM right now. New entries, you also saw them, and the replications, basically redundant entries. So they can be removed by just clicking remove identical to master records. So when you click on it, I already told you about this spontaneously here. On the left, you have basically the ESM where the entry originates from, and on the right, everything that overrides it. So I can just quickly jump over this because I already talked about it. And when you apply a filter on an entry, I can just do this in real time perhaps to show you here. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Here. So basically, I think I should close it and open it again, so you see it how it is when it's naked, when it's basically not yet paired up without any filters applied yet. So I'm actually still using Mod Organizer, and I would just use this old version of TS5 Edit here because it was solid so far, and I'm running it and it will fire up. And then I'm getting to the selection window, just as you saw before here. And I will just select something. say I take Sky UI and Atmora just for the sake of it. Now you can see that it's loading, and it's loading and loading depending on your system, but it should just take a few seconds. And you will see that it has processed some files here in the messages. And on the left in the tree window, you also see that there is a few files that have been loaded, and they are just plain white. So all you basically can see is the plain entries without any interpretation of these. For instance, you can already see the ESM flag. If you go in here, you have flags for your master file, and you can see, yes, it's basically the right protection of ESM. So if I would remove that flag, it would just make an ESP as soon as I hit save, but I don't want that. And if I want to clean it, the first thing I always have to do is apply filter for cleaning, so I can actually see conflicts. So it's the same again, it's running through all these entries that have been loaded into the tool. And it actually might take a few seconds. I mean, newer versions of xEdit are faster, might also be dependent on your machine as well. But yeah, for me, waiting 20-30 seconds so far was okay. I also made pictures of this process, so if you feel like waiting another 10 seconds is too tedious, then we can just move on. But I just wanted to show you basically that the colors will appear as soon as the filter is being applied. So there's no magic with these colors, it's just the basic workflow. And it's normal that it's just white first. Okay, it's taking a bit of time. I can just put it to the side maybe. Okay, it doesn't move. Have there been so many records? Okay. Alright, I will... now it's done, I guess. No, it's still building references. And it found some unused data in Dragonborn and Hearthfires. Okay. So it wasn't even at Atmora yet. It was just busy with the basic files. I will just click on my presentation and continue for now. So you can right click on your file and then check for errors. And you can remove the identical records there as well. It's in the same view, in the same window, in the same correction window. And you can actually use the ID of missing references, for instance, in the search bar to find them and change the entries or just remove them. So this would be this point of resolving conflicts. So you can choose which one should be overwritten, which one should be the last one to be there, or you can just remove them all the same. And in the end, what I also suggest you to do is remove auto-generated nav mesh. So whenever you hit save in Creation Kit, usually it will generate nav mesh. And if you don't want that, and usually we prefer to do manual nav mesh because it can make a lot of issues, then I would suggest you to remove that. And finally, when you want to close TS5 Edit again, I would suggest you to document any unusual issues you get or fix them immediately if you can. So we have specific sheets for that. We have an Excel chart and other tools. If we have unusual errors, luckily, usually we don't have any actually, because we did a lot of cleaning the last years, and so we came to a point where this is not necessary. But it is important to keep an eye on these because some of them might be critical. So here again, I highlighted. You just right click on your file, and then you can go for the golden frame. That would be check for errors. That would be the main process we'd been talking about. It would just give you this, what you see with the blue arrow here. Those are entries it found as errors. And then there are different error types. We'll talk about this in a second. So at the end of the process, it will tell you it's done checking for errors. And then you have this list. And you could copy this list, and if you have a lot, you might actually want to copy it into a spreadsheet or an Excel chart and then sort it by keywords with color coding. If you just have a few and you have an idea what you're looking at, it's not a problem. You can just be directly here in TS5 Edit and fix those. So what you can do, if there's, for instance, a missing reference, you can take the ID of this reference that is missing and put it right here into the navigate here in the search bar to go to these entries and fix them. And then you even have a back and forth button on the top right, so you could go back and forth to come back to this window here and see the messages and check the other errors. So you could go through them pretty quickly if you're used to the process. Also, what I highlighted here for you is apply scripts. So there are many useful scripts. One of them is, for instance, show an LOD version of the whole world map. So you can make a whole world map to plan things like claims and everything for level design. Here you have again the remove identical to master records, and here you have clean masters, which will remove all the redundant master files that you don't need because you don't refer to form IDs from those. How do you get master files as dependency that you don't need? Well, you just need to load them in Creation Kit by accident even. Like if I, let's say, load Atmora with Campfire, it can happen that it adds a Campfire as a dependency for Atmora, but I don't need it. So I just click here and I can just remove it again. And what you also sometimes might need here if you work with master files is that the first time you work on it or you add a new voice type, you would usually click to other and create a seg file. So this is usually a fix if you cannot hear your voice actor's dialogue. Yeah, let's have a quick look at the filter in the meantime. Yes, it has done applying the filter. It's done. So now you see it's red basically here, and you see that whilst the official DLCs here are dark red font, Atmora has this orange red font, which means that we override something here. And if I open this, you see there's a lot of white entries. These white entries mean that this is just new stuff. You have this yellow one, so that is something where we actually changed something. Here's even a green one. Okay. I should actually remove this. Remove identical to master records. Okay, it doesn't. Strange. Because something new was added in here. All right. Of course. So if we add something new, the other identical records will remain because it's the whole block is just shown because of this entry here. So I cannot remove it by cleaning. Good. Yeah, dialogue topics, factions. So for instance, the Slaughterfish faction here is getting an override by unofficial Skyrim legendary patch, and we don't have this entry, so we would basically override the unofficial legendary edition patch. So what we would do now is, if we make a unofficial Skyrim patch compatible version, we would copy this entry to Atmora, and you see it's not red anymore but yellow instead. This is because we override the original Skyrim entry for the Slaughterfish factions. So yeah, this is one example how basically you could treat these conflicts for cleaning them. And I think it's important to do this before merge, because what you will see here, especially with world space, and this can get a bit cheesy, I say, if you go to a big world space and you have many cells and you didn't make proper claim borders, it can happen that you have like few hundred conflicts. And so you want to make sure that your level designers also just stay within their boundaries, or you can have a chess pattern of new and old cells mashed up together, and if they even have different height of terrain and everything, you can see through the ground, and you don't really want that. So in this instance, we have a specific place in Skyrim where Dawn-God and Atmora as well added something for adding something here in the game. So we really try to change as few things as possible, but we do have a few actors walking around and so forth, and a few objects perhaps, so you need to make the nav mesh fit around them. And you automatically see that there are some red entries here, but it's still relatively few. Now, that was it for this part. You see, it is actually pretty straightforward with TS5. I think that most people are also familiar with it. And once you see these arrow nodes here, so in our example, we have only seen the first one. Reference was deleted but contains base object. This happens when you have a master file, but then a patch file, an ESP, is deleting entries of that master file, which is fine. It's adding a deleted flag on an entry that is copywritten or writing protected in the master file. It just means that it was not executed and this thing is still existing. So this will just happen after the merge, not before. So you just keep this and can ignore this issue. You don't need to do anything about this one. What is more interesting, or maybe something that needs to be dealt with, is if you have the missing reference issue. So you can have a CDD or something if a script is not filled with a certain property. But this was the easy one where you can just put in the reference ID of that missing entry, and you can just try to fix it manually. So you can go there and you can just change an entry. Let's say I just go to a random thing here, and let's say if there was none here, I could just type anything like here, skill. It says it has no skill. Okay, fine. If this wasn't a critical issue, I can just choose any other, and you can basically choose them here or in Creation Kit. The choice is yours. You just have to delete these issues. And then I saw this virtual machine adapter issue sometimes. It is basically the same as when you have a deleted object. It just refers to something with logic, like a trigger box, for instance, or a marker. So once you merged it and the deleted flag is executed, it means actually that you remove the copyright from your master file so that everything can be finally deleted in your master file. This will be gone. And usually if your level designer or implementer knows what they do and they didn't break something, I think this was an intended delete and it will be fine. So this is also not something you need to worry about. A last thing I want to warn you about is this undelete and disable references. You can, if you have a patch file, remove all of these delete flags at once. But be careful with that, because you can end up with having a lot of duplicates in your world space and you don't really want that. Right. There's also further cleaning guides, but the most important is here tracing down errors and resolving them. And so I'll jump right to the next one. So this is the infamous Creation Kit log that gives you all the editor warnings that you had. And usually what we'll do now here, as I quickly mentioned already or briefly mentioned, I will take them and put them in an Excel chart like this, and then apply some kind of sorting. So you have these rules here. It works in Google Spreadsheets as well. And this will allow you to find very quickly which ones are nav mesh, which ones are this and that. Like I've literally had 27,000 entries at once here. Because if you run through your world space and you have a few hundred cells, and then in each cell you have a few dozen objects, and then perhaps you have a very basic texture set in several nitri shapes of several of these objects, the editor warning reports will potentially multiply. So it is possible you get a lot of entries here, and until you have fixed all of them, of course, it takes a while. So it's good if you identify which issues are unique, and then you can resolve them by frequency. So this way, in just a few weeks, I got it down to like 15 from 27,000. It is possible to keep track. So never get demotivated by this. It just looks a lot like it's basically, if you resolve one certain issue, it's possible that you resolve hundreds of errors, error notes or editor warnings that you get at once. To not even have them in the beginning, be a bit more on the preventive side here, to not even get these editor warnings, so you really see crucial issues for implementation and you don't see minor things. We have had a list of a few best practices that you can apply when you have level design. So this is more towards level design in 3D, but it's important because they could potentially be very nasty to work with or annoying to work with. So you want to make sure that your objects in Creation Kit, if you have a cell interior, you don't want them to be too far away from the center, too far below the ground or in X and Y, because else it will generate this editor warning, because usually it's just stuff that people forget when they move them across the map, and then you can't really use it and it's just being rendered and loaded. The light radius shouldn't be too high. The nav mesh should be always on top of the ground. The nav mesh borders should be finalized. I think that should be clear. So you get this little green bar, so people can actually work from one side to the other. And you have this very convenient overlay function where you can test enough mesh without actually going into the game. You just see this filling color. Should work. Shader flex is a bit a tricky issue because it's NIF scope stuff and 3D. When you have the opportunity to apply new texture sets on meshes in Creation Kit. Now, this is tricky because in the Gamebryo engine with all the NIFs, they have basically hard set up shaders, and these shaders have specific properties. So some shaders need 3 slots in the texture set, and others just need 2. Speaking especially about default and environmental shaders. And if you just change them around in Creation Kit, it's possible you don't see that. So let's say I have a rock and I put ice textures on it. It will render, you will see the ice, but it will throw an error and it will look a bit odd. So what happens here is that I actually need 3 textures for the ice, but I just had 2, so I get a warning. And if you have a few hundred rocks, and each of these rocks has a few nitri shapes with their own shaders, and each of them is throwing their own error, you see where this is going. So you quickly get a lot of errors. So the work around this is that you would, instead of changing the rock in Creation Kit to ice, you would basically just copy the rock itself and paste it in your build, and then change in NIF scope the shader from default shader to ice to environmental mapping, and then you can basically use this as a hard reference. So you load the stone the way it is, and you don't change the texture set inside Creation Kit because you already did so in the NIF itself outside of the ESM. This way you don't have any issues, and you can be sure about it. I mean, this is specifically if you change shader types. If you have the same shader type, there's no issue. Missing object references can happen. This is basically when something has been deleted that should not be deleted. And here you need to talk with people, especially where you place new resources and what are the names of the folders. Usually, if it exists somewhere, you can look for it in your build, and you should find it in the folders if you look for the name and then naming terminology is clear. You could perhaps just load the mesh in to the base object. So how does it look? If you have a base object in Creation Kit and it says it has a missing object reference, it will just appear as a red box with a white exclamation mark, and so you can just put it in there. The eternal load screen issue is also interesting. You should definitely keep your distance with map markers and teleport markers from auto load doors. Else it can happen that you just have an eternal load screen that you just enter one load door, and when you want to leave it on the other side, you automatically enter the next load door and go back and forth eternally. So this could really break the game. Yes, of course, if conditions are changed, and all of these things need to be a bit talked about. So, or if just activators are changed, scripts and quests, or if you just use existing scripts and quests and activators, you always need to make sure that you don't have overrides into vanilla and break something else. Good. You might have leftovers under the ground. That's always bad practice because it will cost you performance. You might only want to have one COC marker per cell, as will also throw warnings to you. You want to make sure that your content always has consistent names, so you don't have overrides because of inconsistent names, and you find all the objects. I already mentioned not to carelessly remove deleted flags, because they're usually placed purposefully, like level designers deleted something, usually on purpose. Rendering issues, if shader flags are set wrong, like vertex colors and other things, you will find this a lot. It's usually line 206. It's when the vertex color is wrong. So once you have an Excel sheet and you see a lot of issues, you will find that it's always the same kind of issues. Then you also have issues like from Bethesda. Basically, since the vanilla game, they exported some DLC to trees as a static, and so they don't move with the animation of a tree, and then it throws you this mesh type errors like, please re-export this again because it was not in the proper format. I mentioned the claim boundaries, and also always keep in mind, if you do fixes, like if you have fixed these things in Creation Kit, for instance, and you want to merge now, keep the load order in mind. Of course, you have to merge your fixes last, else they are completely lost again, and you have to start again. And yeah, my last advice at this point is to really promote the idea that people, even though it's really annoying, keep the Creation Kit warnings on load. So then just click yes. So they really are forced to read through and then document and or resolve them with the team. Good. That's basically the editor warnings. Now, something else you can do, but it is not as often useful, is have a Papyrus log or the script log, which basically gives you a message, an output, what the game was doing last. So especially if you have crash to desktop situations, you can trace down what was the last thing that happened before that. So this is something to look at. Maybe I just leave it here as a reference. You need to interpret this. So you just get the last command of the game, but you don't really see the issue yet. But it is definitely a good pointer. And then we have specific tools and console commands to find specific objects that are broken and document them. So if it's very valuable if you have team members that go through the build and detect things visually and give you some subjective impression of the player experience. That's something that you cannot get from other tools, of course. I'm just jumping over these console commands, and here's just another example how we actually track down issues. So we just usually we had PDF documents with pictures and descriptions. Then we moved over actually making a channel, and we also made a spreadsheet where people have access to, and then we can with drop down menus categorize the issues and who resolves them and how we resolve them and so forth. So this is very, very helpful, so that cleaning and merging and also quality assurance after that doesn't take too much time, because you want to be efficient and precisely target these issues and don't look around for weeks. Right, now this was the first half. I'm sorry, it was a bit more than the half, I admit, because cleaning is actually totally underestimated, depending on who you work with, of course. Maybe you already have veteran members in your team who already know to clean their things, but it's really most of the work that you do. And the other things that you do here by merging, by just bringing the entries together, is rather a routine process and straightforward once it's established and set up. So actually that's the good thing, and it's less bothersome. So actually, I have to say again that TS5 edit and merge plugins and zmerge are modded tools and not done by Bethesda. So they are a bit smaller, but maybe also more down to specific tasks. And which tool to use, it's kind of subjective, but I have to say that, of course, most teams use version control and perforce the correct way, how Bethesda used it, especially with Special Edition. So I was mainly using actually the other three tools and predominantly merge plugins, but that's because I have a very old setup here, and I've done this for a long time with a very stable system. But we are going to move forward now as well into Special Edition. So take it with a grain of salt, but this workflow is definitely established. So if you ever need this as a plan B, there you go. You would just open it, and I opened it via Mod Organizer, and choose your profile of the game and your files. And then you would load them similar to TS5 Edit. It has to load all these files. Then you need to check for the errors. Remove old merges that you had before, because you don't want to have naming inconsistencies. Then you would click on create a new merge. You can basically see this on the left here. Then you give it a name, an override method, overrides conflicting usually. And then lastly, you would add your files to the new merge, which is on the second tab here, merges tab. And then you can build the merge, and you're basically done. You just need to wait then until it's finished, and then finalize it in Creation Kit. That is when things on the previous master record, which have been flagged as deleted in the ESPs, finally got deleted, and as well as finalizing your nav mesh again. And also, when it's done, it's coming out as a ESP file. So what you want to do again is in TS5 edit, make it a master file. So basically it would look like this. When it's green, you can build it, or you can click on the hammer on top. Some other notes in case you need it. If you have any issues doing that, you can click on resolve issues and you will see it gives you this resolves issues interface or window where it tells you the issues it had. And then there's also some explanations here, but usually you just see the green part. If you follow these steps, there shouldn't be any issue. And it also can recompile the scripts. I know exactly that recompiling is not recommended. It's actually even one of these reasons why zmerge and other tools are suggested to be used. Recompiling was usually used to avoid having duplicate names and having consistent naming conventions on the scripts and making sure that the form IDs fit into a certain range. So with the Legendary Edition, we just had a limited amount of arrays, amount of entries in our array that we could actually fill. But with Special Edition, that's not really a concern. Anyways, if you feel like you want to do that, you just have a link here. You could just click it. I think I'll upload the presentation as well, and you can just put it in as it's written down here, and it would work. One disadvantage here is actually that the information in your dialog view window is not being saved. So your dialog views would lay on top of each other. You could drag them out with your mouse by drag and drop again, and so they look pretty again after the merge. But the basic structure, of course, is kept. So what you see on the left would be maybe overlaid. So the orange boxes and the pink, lila, pink, violet box would be on top of each other. But this view on the right side, where you have the dialogues sorted to the certain level, of course, this would be maintained. So the structure is not being damaged. It's just that the visual information of where and X and Y basically to align these sheets here where you direct them before is gone. That's an issue, but not for everyone. I mean, there's also the way that you can, I personally prefer the box on the right to work with dialog anyways, and you can also export them as Excel. So there was a way to export them as CSV sheet, which is a small form of Excel, and then you can also integrate them again. But it wasn't really something I was actually bothering looking into so far. I could just work with this view as well. So zmerge was coming up later as the successor of merge plugins, and it has advanced a lot. So it can also dynamically get files from get form IDs from other files and fill them in. It can also renumber conflicting form IDs, and it should never come to the point where you don't have enough arrays. So that was already much better, and Mator said it's much safer because if you don't recompile these scripts, there is not the need to decompile them first and not the need to reinterpret them and compile them again. So it's reducing a risk here, but again, I was also not having issues before with merge plugins. So it's like it's a good improvement, but not really a primary concern of mine before. You also have the GitHub page linked here, the documentation, the modding tools Discord where you can talk with them, and you have a more thorough explanation on the process there as well. Finally, you also have the opportunity to inject entries as deep copy in TS5 edit. So you basically create a new master and then copy in all the entries you need. This is more straightforward. However, you need to open and close it for each ESP. It's possible to do. I just personally did it a few times, but I was still preferring my merge plugins workflow. But I mean, it's open for you guys to try out what works best for your project. I think it's not suited for huge projects, given that you have a lot of manual processing here, but it's definitely precise. So that's what's good about TS5 edit. And finally, we come to the white elephant in the room, the Creation Kit version control and Perforce. So since the fixes for the Creation Kit and Special Edition, It is said to be more stable and reliable now. And there is documentation how to set it up. I just quickly went through it. So you add a line in your Skyrim editor ini file. You add a few lines in your Skyrim editor prefs ini. Then you create new folders. Then this is a bit tricky. I would suggest you to watch that video and go through carefully how to share your folders. Because if they are not shared carefully, then if they're not correctly shared, there's no chance you can actually write new files in there. It will not give you access. I will just give you all of these lines as resource and upload them so you can copy paste if you like to. I just thought that explaining it more abstractly and going over quickly is better because reading this line by line I think doesn't make sense. And then there's something you have to do to actually be able to work with this Skyrim ESM, because there's a copy protection. So there is a certain block here, the B1 block, where you just change an entry and then save again, and you have basically have a compromised or a hexed version of the ESM, and you can use this one as a master file to draw your entries from and create your own ones. It's all also described in that video I linked here below, and you also have the official creation kit website, the wiki's explanation for version control and creating custom master files, which is recommended. I also think that Elskrooks and a few others have a lot of profound practical experience with this workflow. 2 or 3 years ago, I was at Sky Oblivion for a short visit where they just changed the merging process going to SSE, and I think they also by now have a lot of experience in there. I should actually ask a bit more around and make it more solid, and then update our Arcane University wiki with it. So that would be my plan. You actually do have to go back and forth a little bit with the newly merged files if you use Perforce and version control. But I think if you stick to the workflow, it should be fine. Yeah. That would be it. I promise I will give you more details on the special edition / Perforce and version control merging process. I'm aware of the fact that I was mostly drawing from my experience on cleaning and on older processes, but we're going to, I think we're going to update our information there very soon, thoroughly. Yeah. I thank you very much for your attention. I would love to answer questions. I hope I can. And yeah, just let me know.
Hey, will there be a place where I can find this presentation later just to look over it? There was a lot of useful information here, and I definitely did not quite absorb all of it.
Sure, yeah. Like with the last shader talk I was involved with, I would ask Pat to upload this presentation directly under the video link. I think we'll bring it on YouTube, if I wasn't mistaken. And cool, thank you very much. So there you'll get your presentation. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, Hendrik helped me today, Hendros. I think he's also here. Thank you again. Yeah. So he gave me a fun fact for today. Yeah. It's so funny. I mean, Dog Brotherhood is such a spooky thing, and then you're like, oh, wait, he's Winnie the Pooh. But yeah. Cool. Yeah, merging.
You might need to ask Hannes, not me.
Yeah, I have a question. How did you get started learning the creation kit? Like, what really
that
drove you to pick up most of your knowledge?
okay. That's good. Actually started looking YouTube tutorials, and I also checked out. I think the first thing would be always the Bethesda thing, the Bethesda videos. You have 10 videos about 5 minutes, and they show you basically the basics of lighting, the basic of ambushes, the basic of level design, the basic of this, that. So you get a hang of it. And then I was watching more and more videos. Honestly, if you want to be efficient and you have an issue with reading dry stuff, you can just straight away go forward to the Creation Kit wiki, because they have this walkthrough quests, they walk through dungeons and everything. But if you like a little bit entertainment or a personal taste, a flavor of things when people present something, of course, there's so many amazing videos. I don't know, I think I watched Sonic Wingnuts and Dog Fox, of course, and he wasn't that famous back then. And there's so many things. And also, I picked up a few things, and I already started. I mean, I was, you can say, the first or the second in my team actually to work in Creation Kit. So, but of course, when new people came to my team as well, we also learned from each other greatly. So, yeah. And then, of course, you also, over the years, you watch how other people work, and you discuss theories and how to make things better, and it just grows. But I think it helps to give yourself milestones and interesting topics that you want to cover and that you want to learn about. That helps a lot, I think. So you will find, I can give you specific links for the Bethesda videos and for the Creation Kit wiki, because I think that helps. Just give me a second and I will dig them out somewhere. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really want to say that it shouldn't never scare you, because I know it is usually. It's usually that you have so many question marks, so many new words, and but it should be like a step by step process, and it's very interesting once you're in it and you have the right motivation. And what channel should I post the link? Maybe the lecture hall. Okay. Okay, so this would be the very basic. Ah, right. Someone posted them already. Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. And now I'm catching the Creation Kit wiki as well. Case. It's very general, because it doesn't tie you to a certain topic. It just gives you a grand overview. But if you also like, as I said, maybe follow personal people who do things, I think that going through then maybe Dog Fox would be a good suggestion. But there are many others as well. And when you're very excited to learn something specific, like I remember exporting or rigging or something, it took us a while to figure this out. So everyone was keen on learning about it. It's really a cool motivation to see when other, let's say, specialists and hobbyists are working on it. It's a personal recommendation, but there's so many people who make decent Skyrim tutorials or have made Skyrim tutorials. Yeah. I mean, Creation Kit tutorials, obviously. When you say Skyrim tutorials, sounds like gaming, but of course we are basically building the game or trying to build a game, so it's not exactly the same.
Is there ever a point when you're working with Creation Kit that it just kind of becomes a part of you, like second nature, not really thinking about like how to do a thing, you just already know? Does that make sense?
I know what you mean. I'm just checking. Well, I'm soon hitting the 5,000 hours in my Creation Kit, but that's just on the record. I think I have a lot more off-record time, much more. I don't know. There's still odd things. like I can tell you one story. We had a cave, and there was actually a scene supposed to play for the main quest. And fun thing was we had the scene completely implemented, and then me and my technical director, we looked at it and we are like, okay, scene should work. Fine, let's playtest. We walk in and it didn't. And why didn't it work? There was a bonfire and there was chairs to sit down. What do? They just go to the wrong chairs. We have made specific markers and sent them to specific chairs. But instead, they just walk to other chairs, sit in the wrong direction, and have the wrong animations, and then the talking doesn't work, and they're interrupted. We're like, what's happening here? And then we really, punch our heads against the wall for weeks or something. It happens. It just happens. And then we found out it was a stupid kettle. We put a stupid kettle next to the bonfire, and that changed the navmesh ever so slightly, so they can't walk. So it was like a half a step, not enough, and then they would sit down somewhere else, and so another NPC would be first on the first seat, and this would change the animation, and it would change how they talk, and then they don't come to the situation, the scene where the old sailor is talking about his nonsense story. And this entirely broke our scene. It was a stupid kettle being too much to the left. So we made it smaller, put it to the right, and everything worked again. So this is like magic. So much about
how technical is the explanation for how that works, because I'm a little afraid just one kettle can do all that.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, you need some kind of tolerance sometimes to look for answers, but it's also a team thing. Like, if you have a team with you and they all want to do this, and it can be fun. Like, there can be experiences. Like, yeah, I mean, we fixed out the kettle, and then in the end, I mean, if it really wouldn't work, you always find workarounds. It's not like you have to do it in one specific way, but there's a lot of people who are very dedicated and enthusiastic and very, very ambitious, and they really want to see this project gone. Released. And so, this is a place where you have kind of the feeling, the sense of very ambitious people in a good sense that would be commercial, like a studio actually. And on the other side, you still have the opportunity to say, okay, I need to take a break for a while, or I do something else now. But still, you can, if you want, you can work with people on something, and they really burn for it. It's not like they have to do it because they get paid for it, but they really want to do it. And if you take all of this together, yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like, yeah, if this was like, I don't know, Unreal or something, and it would be C++, but then again, if you do these new engines, it's the same on a different level. You have the same issues, just on a different level. You will end up punching your head against the wall continuously all the time, no matter what you do. I think it's just part of game development and software development in general. And as I really want to stand up to it, and I really want to do something with it, and especially for Atmora, it doesn't concern me. I know that I will just go ahead no matter what happens, and then I will be happy when we achieve something. And since there's enough people who share this passion, I'm very sure always that we achieve something and we're happy about it. So it's good. So it feels like a win-win situation, even though it can be that sometimes you're frustrated, but usually there's still a lot of things you can do. And before you get even to a real problem, there's already so many people here who have seen solutions and who have found solutions. So it's usually not a concern that I would get stuck somewhere anymore. I mean, there are things that are hard to do, but you always find a solution. It's not on a showstopper level, Yeah. I don't want to bore you, of course, with my monologue, but I appreciate your interest, and I would love to talk with you about something else. And I'm sure that some of you might actually know much more about perforce and version control. So it's one of my personal challenges to go next for.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Have a nice evening, guys.